Hello, welcome to Hat Trick. I am Jordan Dollar Coltman, joined by Elliott Tanti, and we have one of our recurring but most special guests, the mother pucker herself. Larisse Campbell is with us. But Elliott, before we even let Larisse get in here, there is a very important conversation that must be had. We need some clarification and some answers about something rather controversial that you posted on your social media. Can you please tell the listeners at home the significance and meaning of the lawnmower that is now tattooed on your arm?
Yeah, so I'm not sure that I'm ever going to do this justice, and it's a new tattoo, so I haven't refined the story yet. Essentially, about 2 months ago, my sister came to me and said that she wanted to get matching tattoos, and I was all in favor of that. And then we ran into a roadblock around what that tattoo was going to be. And we realized the unifying thing in our lives is this 30-year-old lawnmower that my father refuses to throw away, yet we are both required to use anytime we are asked to cut the grass at the house. And it is a piece of junk. It rarely starts. It usually dies at least once, if not twice, during the task of mowing the lawn. And we both hate it with all our passion. And so we decided that we would get a matching tattoo of the lawnmower to immortalize it forever as, the greatest frustration shared between the two of us.
It's great.
It's great. I'm all about a good hate tattoo.
I like it too. That's fantastic. Did she get it in the same place?
Yes, yeah, we got
That's
it.
awesome. So you have matching bicep lawnmowers.
Yeah, hers is on her arm. But the cool thing was the tattoo artist, Nathan Panus, is here in Edmonton. Really great guy, really great artist. If you're ever looking for a tattoo in Edmonton, big shout out to Nathan. He actually let her do a line on my arm, which is cool too. So we've got that piece of history of how to do it.
She didn't let you do a line on hers?
No, not at all. Not coloring in the lines is not my forte. Let's just say that.
All right. Well, let's get to it. Here's topic one. All right. So we're going to start this week with a topic that we didn't have a show last week. So we have to sort of address some things. And I think that for those who have listened, it's pretty clear we are in a podcast that has spent a lot of our time celebrating and talking about and creating content surrounding the Edmonton Oilers. We're Oiler fans, the three of us. Many of our guests are Oiler fans, Larisse included. Many of our listeners are Oiler fans. And obviously, this is the time of year where training camp's underway. People are getting excited about the NHL season. Hockey's back. But this year has been a little bit different from the perspective of being an Oilers fan, because I think that, a lot of Oiler fans, many of us included, have been very conflicted around the decision to bring accused rapist Jake Virtanen into the Oilers organization on a professional tryout. Now, we should make it very clear for those who are new to this story. He has not been given a contract, an NHL contract, to play for the Oilers. He is not currently a member of the team. He is here on what is considered a tryout. It's a structure within the current CBA that allows players who are looking for an opportunity to get a league minimum deal, rather than end up having to play overseas or somewhere else, an opportunity to come into a training camp and try to basically take the job of someone who may already be there, a developing player or whatever. And we've seen this work out many times in different situations. We've also seen situations where players come in on a PTO with one organization and sign down the road in Calgary, the day after preseason. That was Christopher Stieg. The reality of this situation is twofold. One, the Edmonton Oilers are doing this in a very sort of strange situation, considering they don't have cap to sign him or Demers currently. I believe they have less than $200 total in available salary cap after the LTI of Mike Smith and Oscar Klefbom comes off the book. So they're already in a very tight situation when it comes to contracts. And so it begs the question, why on earth the organization has made the decision to bring in someone who brings with him not only a very questionable history in the league as a player. This is an individual who twice under contract to the Vancouver Canucks showed up to camp out of shape to the point where he almost failed a physical. So there's already some question marks surrounding his on-ice conditioning. Secondly, and more importantly, I think, there is a serious cloud following his recent history legally. We talked about it when it happened on this show. He was accused by a woman here in Vancouver of rape. She ended up being able to take those accusations to the police several years after the incident itself. Jake Virtanen was released, actually bought out by the Vancouver Canucks. He actually played last season in the KHL. He came back to Canada this year to face trial, which he did. He was found not guilty by a jury of his peers here in Vancouver. He is now currently facing a legal lawsuit, which is often the case in these circumstances when the jury court system finds someone not guilty of a sexual assault. The next step for victims is often the lawsuit route. So legally, he has not been found guilty of this crime, but the sideshow and all of the baggage that is attached to him has been brought down on Oiler fans, on the community surrounding the team, on the city of Edmonton, by simply offering this gentleman an opportunity to come in here on a PTO that he probably will end up without a contract at the end of anyway. And so there's a lot of question marks, I think. There's a lot of more difficult conversations that we're trying to have. That's what this podcast is about. We have talked already this year about Live Golf, for example. And when you have a sporting league that is funded by a country that has significant human rights issues, there's a term that has kind of become more and more common, I think, in our lexicon, which is sports washing. The idea that organizations, individuals, countries who have this baggage, which I guess is the term I'm using right now, attached to them, find ways to allow sports or things, entertainment, to sort of wash over and distract from some of those other issues. And in this situation, I think the challenge here is that you have people, fans, ourselves again included, who have huge emotional investments in a team, in the individuals who are already on that team, in the narrative and the storylines surrounding that team, who are put in a position when a choice like this is made to question not only their allegiance to that organization, but the morality of that organization and all of the personal investment that they have put into that, I think comes into question. And that's difficult. And there's a lot to unpack. So that's what we're going to spend a few minutes here doing. This topic will probably be longer. Certainly the introduction has been, but it's because it's complicated. It's because there's a lot to deal with. So I'm going to step back now. I've kind of laid out as best I can where we are with all of this. A week ago, Elliott, we're all getting ready for training camp. Obviously, there were rumors this was going to happen. Everyone's favorite Oilers writer, Mark Spector, gave us a glimmer of hope, I believe, on the Friday, suggesting it wouldn't happen. And then 2 days later, it was announced it was happening and that he was given that PTO. When it happened, and I guess in the week since, what were your feelings? What are your feelings? And sort of where are you sitting with all of this as an Oiler fan?
Jordan, that was a great introduction, and I really appreciate the time and effort that you put into it to sort of really explain things, because these are hard conversations and none of this is black and white. And I think context is really key in this. And so, I appreciate you taking the time to spell this out. To say I was disappointed would be an understatement. I really have, up until this point, really struggled on a number of fronts with the Edmonton Oilers. And the concern I have as an Oilers fan right now, as someone who is, consider myself to be fairly socially conscious and engaged in issues in sports beyond just the final score at the end of the night. I'm really concerned about what this action says about the team that I love. And I don't know that I have an answer for you, or that I can even really, express how I'm feeling. But my work, when I'm not on this podcast, is really around reputation and branding and marketing. And I'm really concerned that a really problematic image is starting to emerge for the Edmonton Oilers. And because this is not just a one and done. We had this exact conversation offline 6 or 7 months ago when Evander Kane joined the organization. We had a conversation similar to this 12 months ago when Duncan Keith gave what I believe Larisse responded, described as bullshit answer to the questions and concerns that emerged out of the Chicago Blackhawks organization while he played for that team. And there are other examples in recent history, the Edmonton Oilers, of them protecting or engaging with players that have suspect situations in their personal lives. And that, to me, I worry about. I worry about reputationally. And I guess there are those that will say the game is the game and the person is the person, and I just care about the game and the outcome of the score, and that's it. But that's not me, and that's not how I feel. And I know you've gone through a reckoning with our football team name. I went through a reckoning with our football team name here in Edmonton, and like it's getting to the point where enough is enough, I think, for me. And that's really hard to say. Am I there? Have they crossed the line? I mean, I guess not. I was looking at the highlights tonight of the first preseason game, so I'm still engaged. But I do think it just, you described sort of the Oilers cap situation, and that's not enough of a reason not to sign this individual. In fact, there's a lot more of a reason not to. But it just seems nonsensical. And like, why are we doing this? I'm sort of lost in this whole piece.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. I think that's where, I think that's, you're in a very similar place, I would say, to where I am. And I'm going to turn it over to Larisse here in a second, but I wanted to just point out too, that, all of those things I pointed out as reasons why he probably won't end up being signed. As you say, like, they're irrelevant in terms of the bigger conversation about the unanswered conversation about like why the organization has made this decision. You laid out a couple of the good examples, I think, that do exist already within this organization. There's also the fact that, I mean, its president is going to be sitting in front of the federal government's inquiry into the Hockey Canada situation, because Bob Nicholson was the president of that organization for almost a decade. Prior to the most recent allegations, but several of the allegations that have come out since were under his tenureship, and we have heard nothing from Bob Nicholson. So there is, again, as you say, this sort of pattern of behavior that is emerging that is, to be fair, bigger than just the Edmonton Oilers. Hockey, I think, is stepping into its bigger reckoning for the first time. This last year has really been, there's been a lot of this. But that's a big part of it. I want to say one thing before I turn it over to Larisse, because I know she has things to say, but I wanted to say it on behalf of our show. I think it's important to acknowledge that we are a show that is hosted traditionally week to week by three white men. And we do have an obligation, I think, to do a better job of trying to find inclusive voices to have on our show. And more importantly, not just when the topics specifically deal with issues of gender, of sexual assault, of racism, of any of these things. We should be doing a better job. So I wanted to acknowledge that, because I don't want there to be, I don't want it to simply feel like every time one of these, because you pointed out already, we had Larisse on when we were talking about Chicago, because she has very powerful, I think, and important things to say about it. But those aren't the only things that we should be listening to your voice and other people's voices about. So I need to acknowledge that, because we can do better as a show to ensure that that's happening, that we're not just having, it shouldn't be tokenism. It shouldn't be representation when convenient. And I think that that's important. I'm acknowledging our own frailty in that, or however you want to put it. That said, I know that this is something that you have been struggling with and unpacking as a fan of the Oilers, as a fan of hockey, as someone who, as I sort of said, people are getting excited about. Like, this is a time of year traditionally where you are excited to you would be watching every highlight, you'd be watching every week. Yeah. Obviously, it's different this year. So I'll turn it over to you and sort of where are you with all of this week? I mean, as Elliott said, we're a preseason game in, a week into training camp, and sort of the beginning of what's next.
Thanks for having me back, and thanks for letting me share. This is a really tough week for me. It's been a couple tough weeks. Normally this is the time when my Facebook feed and my life is, we're back, here we go, this is exciting, I've been waiting for this all summer. I don't know a time I didn't love the Oilers, and as Elliott said, it's getting harder and harder to justify saying that I love the Oilers when we keep having these conversations. And it just feels like they are okay with alienating marginalized people, women, non-binary folks, anyone who may have experienced sexual assault or sexual violence in their lives. It feels like they are comfortable saying we don't matter, or our concerns or our fears don't matter. And I personally have not tuned in. I'm having a really hard time not occasionally checking Twitter and finding out what's going on. But I can't think about right now watching the team with him still on the ice. Um, I should, caveat and say I believe in our justice system to an extent. We know, though, that sexual assaults are not prosecuted in Canada to the amount that they happen. I think the average that receives an actual, like, where a charge is laid and then found guilty is like 6.5%. 7%. And that's one stat. Some people say up to about 12%, but that's an incredibly low number. And so, do the Oilers have every right to offer him a PTO? Sure. But why? We've talked about the cap space. It doesn't make sense. We talked about how he has multiple times shown that he does not honor the opportunity to be an NHLer and show up prepared. And then why would the Oilers do that and bring the circus that surrounds this? What is the outcome that they were intending to achieve? Because it just feels harmful and it doesn't make sense to me. And so I'm struggling to know with where I go from here as an Oilers fan. Sure, I want to watch. I want to see Connor and Leon do amazing things. I want to see where this team can go, especially after our run last year. But I just can't right now. And then I also personally struggle with, okay, as soon as he is cut, which I know he will be, I believe that. If I just jump right back in, what am I then saying? What is the point then, really? If I'm only saying it's just this case scenario, and I'm fine with sort of compartmentalizing all of the previous things that have gone on that Elliott has mentioned, or just encouraging that it's okay, we'll always come back if these things continue to happen. And so it's been a tough few weeks as we prepare for this upcoming season, and where I stand, I'm not quite sure. I don't have an answer right now.
Yeah, I think you brought up a really good point, though, which is that, one of the struggles with the conversation around this whole thing, and I think this is also exacerbated this whole week of how this has played out, is exacerbated by the fact that I think I said this to you off air recently. Like, Twitter is such a blunt object. It lacks the ability for nuanced conversation. And yet that is the kind of go-to platform where most of the fan-to-fan interaction around sports occurs nowadays, not just Twitter, obviously, other social media. The challenge, I think, that also exists is that we lack right now, at least in Edmonton, a media environment that is diverse enough, that is sort of competitive enough, and moreover, like independent enough to actually be asking the difficult questions that should be asked. If you go back and listen to some of the Ken Holland press conference, or some of the conversation, even as Elliott brought up, back to like the Duncan Keith press conference, there's a real lack of teeth. I think there's a real lack of accountability and challenging that occurs directly with the individuals here. And therefore, it comes down to the backlash or response of the fan base or of the outside community to occur on social media with this sort of filter on it. And then you end up very quickly down a very sort of ugly hole where you have people entrenching themselves on two different sides of whatever argument, and conversations lose, as I say, that the nuance that is necessary for these things. Yes, we are talking about an individual who was accused of a heinous crime. He had his day in court and he was found not guilty. That does not prove innocence. That proves a lack of sufficient evidence to prove guilt. That is how our system is built. You are innocent until proven guilty. And in this case, he was not proven guilty. Therefore, we have to, if we are going to believe in the system that governs our judicial system, we have to at least accept that to some degree. However, as you say, there is more nuance to it. There are bigger pieces of the morality surrounding these decisions. And in the climate, I think, that exists within hockey culture right now, considering Hockey Canada's situation, considering the Blackhawks a year ago, considering all of the other conversations that are happening, it stands to reason where the moral decision making was when it comes to the choice to do this. Elliott pointed out, strictly from a media PR standpoint, this like there was a conversation that occurred and does occur so often, moreover, I think, in the NFL, but around like drafting, where you have teams making decisions about not drafting it because they don't like their character, or they're not quite sure about the conversation. We talked for years about whether or not the decision to trade Taylor Hall was correct, because there was a suggestion it was because of toxicity in the locker room. I'm sorry, where is that conversation gone? Where is the conversation around all of these young players for whom training camp is a stepping stone moving forward? All of the players who are coming to this organization as free agents, believing in joining the McDavid, Draisaitl, Nurse leadership team, believing that this is a team on the up and up moving forward, all of that positivity, all of that opportunity for regeneration and growth, and all of that. Woodcroft starting his first season, literally every single storyline going into this season should have been optimistic, positive, all of those things. And then you literally just bring in this anchor, this huge element of dead weight that is going to divide your fan base, that is going to create a cloud around you. Half the stories the national media is now going to cover surrounding the Oilers has to have this in it. And of course it has to have it in it. But strictly putting aside what he is accused of and all of the morale parts of that itself, I don't understand the decision. I think that it shows a huge lack of both integrity from the business and hockey side of it, and equally a huge lack of morality and integrity when it comes to what this says, as you say, to victims of sexual assault, to women, to fans, to young people who are looking up to this organization. It just, for me, makes absolutely zero sense. Whether it's simply, them checking a box because there was there is rules about having to have a certain number of veteran players in the lineup for preseason games. They want to get more rookies in there, so you got to have 8 guys who've played 100 games. If that's the reason, that is a horrible and a stupid and a selfish reason to bring such a absolute shitstorm onto your front door, as far as I'm concerned. And it makes me question the organization, decision making, all of it. And if it's strictly a perspective of like they believe he is a better hockey player than somebody they have in there, then I'm equally confused.
And I wonder where we stop. Oh, sorry, Elliott. I wonder where we've stopped along the way, wanting our sports heroes or our sports players, people we look up to. When did we stop wanting them to be good people off the ice, as well as good players, good performers of their job when they're playing? Suddenly we're just compartmentalizing that. And when did that stop? Because in a lot of the engaged conversations I've had around this issue in the past few weeks, a lot of people have said, well, that's off the ice and we're just focused on what's on the ice. Great. But if that was the case, then a city like Edmonton wouldn't have rallied around someone like Joey Moss. They wouldn't have rallied around somebody like Ben last year. If the off ice means nothing, then that means nothing. And that's not the case. It absolutely means something to that city. It absolutely means something to that organization and that team. So when did we stop wanting to achieve or wanting to hire people into these positions where they have power or prestige or given a voice and a platform? When have we wanted them to stop being good people off the ice in this case? And that's mind-boggling to me, especially after Ben and especially after Joey.
Well, yeah, and I think, I think we're getting closer here because there aren't any answers, but I think we're circling around a question. And for me, what's emerged out of this conversation, what I'm thinking about, the question is is how much are you willing to take as a fan? How much are you willing to take as a member of management, as a team, as an organization to win, right? Ultimately, there's been some competitive decision made that Jake Virtanen has the opportunity or the chance or the capacity to make the Edmonton Oilers a better team. And is that marginal increase in capacity for the team, that percent of a percent chance that they get closer to winning a Stanley Cup, worth the baggage and the conversation that fans like us are having right now? And for me, we're starting to get to the point where there are things in this world more important than winning, even for a professional sports team. And that, like, what is that line? I guess that's the question. What is that line for different people? It's going to mean different things, and that's fair. Respect, you have your reasons, but I have mine, and Jordan has his, and Larisse has hers, and I guess that's the question that people need to be asking. But what I find is that line is a lot further than I think all of us would hope. I find we talk a lot and we're very vindictive at times on this show in situations in other markets. And I think what we're all grasping with here, or trying to find a reckoning with, is like, all of a sudden, when it's home time, when it's home time, when it's in your own backyard, is really when it counts, right? And I think we're all discovering, because we've all peeked at the score, maybe not Jordan, but Larisse and I, we've all peeked at the score, looked at something on social media last. Maybe that line's a little bit further than we all thought, right? And
I think you're right. I think you're right. I think one of the things I've been sort of thinking about this whole week is about, I think I probably said it on the show. I've definitely said it in private to many people. I look at sports teams, and when I'm asked by people who aren't necessarily sports fans, like, why should sports matter? Why does sports matter? I believe very strongly that when you invest your emotional energy in an organization, in a team, in a player, whether it's like, if it's an individual player, Serena Williams or whoever we've talked about, when you invest as a fan of something, you have, levels of commitment to that. That's fair. But when you truly invest, when you become a lifelong fan of a team, you have joined and are a member of a community, a network of people who have a shared passion for the organization, different backgrounds, different perspectives, different ways of showing that fandom, whether they're people who financially put out and become season ticket holders, whether they are people who are on opposite sides of the globe and try to watch whatever games they can streaming on whatever platform they can, hack into, whether you're a fan who, fills their basement with the memorabilia and of things of that team, or you're just someone who quietly checks the score every night and is happy that the team's doing well. Whatever level or commitment to that group, that organization, that community you are a part of, there is an investment emotionally in it. And when things like this happen, I think that it challenges and it causes like physical and emotional pain as a fan to feel like something you have emotionally invested in might not be as pure and as aligned with the other parts of your own identity that you may have thought or may have projected onto it. And that's the struggle that I think a lot of fans have. Some fans compartmentalize and are able to dismiss that, or some fans don't care. And I'm not going to sit here like we would on Twitter and get into a argument around whatever your own life experience and baggage coming into this situation is, and where you line up on that situation. But at the end of the day, the truth is, as a fan, we are always at the mercy of the decision making of those organizations. And for the most part, if things are going well, you're you're kind of mostly at the mercy of them making decisions about personnel or about coaching choices, or should they have fired, Dave Tippett in December instead of January, or should they have made this trade or that trade or not re-sign this person or whatever. And we get frustrated, we get angry, we don't agree with, we quarterback, or we, Monday morning quarterback, or armchair GM or whatever. That's part of being a fan. But when this happens, there is a level of outrage and frustration that boils up because you not only don't have control of the decision making, but now the decision making puts you as a fan in a position where your own personal morality, your own personal convictions are being challenged by something you never expected to have to reckon with. That's why it hurts. That's why it's hard. That's why I think there is a real emotional reckoning that people are going through. And it is also the same thing that will allow most people, I believe, to dismiss and let go of this situation if it is rectified by him never being signed to an actual NHL contract. And 2 months from now, most people will just brush this under the rug as having never happened. And that's a coping mechanism too, to protect something you care deeply about. Just as Elliott, I'm glad you brought up the Edmonton Elks and the former name, because I can identify as someone who grew up as a fan of that organization, and I am not that anymore. And the decisions that organization made throughout a decade led me to literally be able to excommunicate myself from that fan base, to completely sever whatever legacy it held emotionally for me. And I went through whatever form of quote unquote grieving process one goes through when they leave a community. But I sit here today not feeling nostalgia or loss or anything, honestly, back to that. That's where I am. I'm not there right now with the Oilers, but I think what struggle is when you care about something the way I think we all do, and the value or importance you put on something the way we have with this team, with these players, all of these things, it really is a really personal process. And everyone, as I say, will come to that with different pieces. Victims of sexual assault will come to this decision from a very different perspective than I can even possibly understand. People who have never been a part or don't, have that perspective will come to it from a different place. People who have been charged with and acquitted of crimes will come to this with a different perspective. People who have never, my point being, no matter who you are and where you come from, you're going to see this in a different way. But I want to make sure it's clear that from my perspective, I am struggling as a fan to rationalize how I am supposed to navigate this situation. And I'm sure there's a lot of listeners out there who are at different places with that too. And that's why I thought it, and I believe it is important. We've been having this conversation. I'm going to give you each an opportunity to sort of have a final say on this, because we've gone through a lot of it. And there may be things you still have to say, but I'm going to let that's where I'm at. So I'm going to leave myself out of there now. Where do we want to go, Larisse? Where are you at with this?
I think that Canadian hockey has a rape problem.
Yep.
And that's hard to say. It's hard to say out loud. And I don't know where to go with that, but I think it is clear that it is now, like I had a friend from the Netherlands send me a message regarding all of this. Not a hockey fan, an F1 and soccer fan. I'm not going to name her, but if she listens, she'll know. And she was sort of shocked. She had spent some time living here and had kind of started to understand our Canadian obsession with hockey in general, specifically mine with the Oilers. And she was sort of shocked to hear that these things were coming to the forefront and that they weren't being treated with more concern from Canadian media. And so overall, I am very, very conflicted on how I move forward, specifically with my team and then into Canadian hockey media and sports in general when these things happen. So I don't know. I think that's my last thought. Yeah, that's that's what I got.
Elliott?
Yeah, I think just as Evander Kane and Duncan Keith before that, it's this whole situation for me has reminded myself of the double standard that I carry in a lots of aspects related to sports. And I think the double standard that we all carry. I think about the fact that there was an F1 race this weekend, I think, canceled in Russia because, or, there was a Russian, it was canceled. And there were Russian players not allowed to play in tennis, and we all stood behind that because of everything that was going on in that space. There's countless examples. I can't stand the NFL, and I think it's a corrupt organization and bad for the players. But I play fantasy football every week. For me, I think it's a good reminder of all the double standards that exist in my own existence, in all of our existences. And I don't think we're asking listeners to have a position one way or another. Maybe we are. I think we're asking you to think about it as we have honest conversations with yourself, with your friends, with your families, with someone that doesn't look like you or doesn't have a shared experience with you. And because those conversations are important. And we're not asking for an answer, but just to keep these conversations going, because up until now, the silence that we've all experienced in Edmonton's media is certainly not helping the situation. And I don't think silence does in any way.
Yeah. I think that's a great way to sort of end it. I think that that's really important. The whole point of this topic this week has been about ensuring that there's an open conversation about it with fans, with fellow fans, with people who you don't agree with. I think that's what I was trying to say about Twitter in general, and the way that I think this situation has once again exacerbated an ever-growing problem in our society, which is that we have become so quick to respond with 120 characters as opposed to actually engaging and having those conversations, right? Some of the responses on both sides of this situation on Twitter, I'm sure, are well thought out. Most of them are not. Most of these things are knee-jerk, angry reactions one way or the other. And then it spirals even further through that, and it becomes, these situations where people are now attacking individuals for expressing themselves. And I think the hard part about this whole thing is when you are a part of this kind of community, whether it's as Canadians, as many Canadians have grown up supporting Hockey Canada, whether they played minor hockey or they cheered for the World Juniors every Boxing Day, or you're a member of a fan base with a hockey team, or you're a member of a fan base of any sport. I'm glad you brought up the NFL. We had the conversation and continue to have the conversation about Deshaun Watson and about countless other players. Hockey's just having their moment. I think, unfortunately, it's long overdue. And that's why I think it's also overdue for these conversations to be had and to continue to have. We have a platform. We use it to have those conversations. But as Elliott's pointed out, our listeners may not agree, may not feel the same way. We would encourage you to, reach out to us if you have questions or thoughts, but more importantly, reach out to the people and reach out to the other people who don't agree with you. Have those conversations. Try to find healthy ways to have those conversations, because you will learn something, you will hear something, and you may get an opportunity to see the world through a perspective you have not yet had. It does not mean you have to agree with them. It does not mean you have to leave that conversation having changed the opinion you brought into it. But if you are open to an opportunity to grow and to listen, only good things can come from that. And I would encourage the Edmonton Oilers organization to try to do the same with their fan base better than they currently are. Listen to your fan base. Try to respect that your fan base is not, as once Kevin Lowe said, just season ticket holders. It is a diverse, ever-growing, ever-changing group of people who bring with them to your organization 1,000 different world perspectives and views, politically, culturally, spiritually, religiously. They come from every walk of life. And if you want to continue to have that fan base support you and grow, then you need to continually listen to their perspectives, even the ones you don't agree with. That's topic one. Okay, topic two. obviously there was some heavy conversations there in topic one. We're gonna keep the rest of the show a little bit lighter and moving along. We played a game a couple weeks ago that we had a lot of fun with. We got some great feedback from our listeners about where we each took a turn sort of fantasizing and imagining what we would do if we got a day with the Stanley Cup. There was some fun and kind of silly again, Twitter comes into this whole thing, news surrounding the Super Bowl halftime show. It was sort of rumored and then unofficially sort of reported, which I always love, on Friday, that Taylor Swift was going to be the halftime performer at this year's Super Bowl. She refuted that, very quickly said, no, that's just not true. Even though pretty much every major news network had reported it, which is, of course, always fun when they all get it that wrong, because they're just in a race to get the news out as opposed to properly vet and check it. However, I think it may have forced the NFL to play their hand earlier than they may have even officially wanted to announce that Rihanna will actually be this year's Super Bowl halftime show performer. Now, the Super Bowl halftime show has always been a pretty big cultural thing. It is as big sort of a moment in some ways as the game itself. A lot of people tune in just to watch the halftime show if it's a performer they enjoy. It's obviously been a touch point or an inflection point culturally many different times. Janet Jackson, different moments where we have had scandal surrounding it or controversy surrounding it. But it's always a big deal. It's always a big thing. And we talked about it, I think, last year too, Elliott. I think you have members of your family for whom the halftime show is the event. And there's a lot of people there. So Rihanna is the halftime show this year. The game is this. You are the producer of next year's Super Bowl. Who has not played the Super Bowl as a performer that you would want to see the play? So who would be your like dream halftime performer? And I will give you the opportunity to make it like a small combo. If it's someone and that would also count. So, because we've had that before, right? We've had like mashups. We had the 50th. We had Coldplay, Bruno Mars, and Beyonce. They've done this before. They have like a
Aerosmith,
whatever it is. So, your dream lineup for the Super Bowl halftime show. I'll go first because I didn't give either of you time to prep or think this through.
Okay.
Right. I'm a big fan personally of going back to like some of the more traditional things where they would bring in like big marching bands, but I want a performer who can like perform alongside a marching band. And I think it would be amazing, having just last weekend seen her win an Emmy, to have Lizzo play the Super Bowl, but I want like the full USC marching band out there, and I want her to enter playing the flute as a part of the band in like the full band regalia. You don't know she's there, and then she steps out and takes off. She's a superstar, up and coming, crazy big hits. I think she would just absolutely destroy a Super Bowl halftime show. I think it'd be unbelievable, but I want like a full like 500 piece college marching band as part of the performance. So that would be mine. I'll go with Lizzo. Who do you have, Larisse? Who would you want to be the Super Bowl halftime performer?
Okay, so in order to like really make this big, I want to bring a band back together that has refused to be together, has said they will never play together again. It has to be that big. So it has to be ABBA. But then we got to bring ABBA's material into our century and bring it to current times. So like ABBA mixed with like, I don't know, maybe like David Guetta or somebody. We've got to have all of the songs remixed, but ABBA reunites for the first time live at the Super Bowl.
That's pretty good. I think that's a big one. And that certainly checks the NFL's box of trying to be like multi-generational. You know, you got mom and dad in the room, you know, sitting there going, hey, you don't know who these guys are? That'd be great. You always need that, right? Elliott, who do you have? I know you're a bit of a connoisseur of halftime performances.
I don't know about that. I'm going to give you a one that I think would probably be surprising that they haven't. And they're top of mind for me because I saw them last week, and that's the Eagles. I would love to see the Eagles play this halftime show. And just because I just watched them this weekend, and those guys can really rock out. If they're going to do it, they better do it fast, because I'm pretty sure Joe Welsh is like ready to die, man. But I would love to see the Eagles. If I wanted to go a little bit more obscure, you know what? Let's totally mess around with the genre. Yeah, I was looking through the 70s and 80s. They used to have marching bands go on there. I mean, that's pretty cool. But I think it's time for the resurgence of the musical. So why not just like a couple numbers of Hamilton? That would be awesome. They could just bring up the whole Hamilton stage and just do a couple numbers from that. I'd be into that.
That's a big one. That'd be something else too. Yeah, it's the kind of the tricky thing, right? Because the halftime show is so much about like trying to draw an audience that may already not be there, and yet at the same time, like it's tricky. I mean, Taylor really is like the biggest name that hasn't, arguably. I mean, Rihanna's there, but like Taylor Swift is different level, right? She's kind of top of the pyramid right now.
But NFL, you've been put on notice. The Eagles are going to die soon. So
it's funny, right?
They're like this. I say that kind of as a joke, but they didn't care. They were like, yeah, we're probably not going to come through here again. So thanks, Edmonton.
That's amazing.
Jordan, you'd love this. So they were all business. They barely talked in between songs. Like it was like go whatever. But Joe Walsh comes out right before one of his songs, and he goes, "Man, I sure enjoyed being 20 in the 70s more than I enjoy being 70 in the 20s."
We'll wait and see. Maybe one of our predictions will come true. Hopefully not Elliott's prediction of the demise of Joe Walsh, but we'll see how that all plays out. Hey, if you have an idea, maybe you've already had this, like maybe you have a dream Super Bowl halftime show already in mind out there, listeners. If you do, hit us up on Twitter, or Instagram, or Facebook. Let us know who your dream halftime show for the Super Bowl would be, and we'll definitely share it, any responses we get on future episodes. All right, that is topic 2.
Hello, football fans and fans of the Ordinary Podcast Network. My name is Tyler Walzak. I am here with Puya Ricey, and we are starting a podcast called Running Down the Clock.
Each week, we're going to bring to you a little bit of football talk, player news, controversies, headlines, all the big plays, and then football action that you can handle.
On August 11th, we will be debuting our podcast, and we are going to break down each division of the NFL up until the season begins. And once that season begins, it is nonstop football talk every Thursday for the rest of the season. We look forward to you listening to us on the Ordinary Podcast Network.
All right, we're going to finish off with hats off. For those uninitiated listeners out there, hats off is the topic where we each take a moment to tip our caps to somebody from the sporting community for whom we believe deserves a moment of recognition. I will go first, and I am tipping my cap to Vancouver-based game developer EA Sports. Now, am I doing that because they have included a woman hockey player on the front cover of the NHL game for the first time? No, although I believe that deserves a little bit of a honorable mention. Sarah Nurse, one of the other nurses, of whom Canada has far too many amazing nurse athletes. Sarah Nurse is on the cover alongside NHLer Trevor Zegras, but I am tipping my cap to EA Sports, based in Burnaby, British Columbia, because FIFA 23 will feature for the first time ever a collaboration with the Musqueam First Nation people. And they have developed a collection of elements that will go into the new game, including a playable stadium, like a fictional stadium developed to look like it is in the mountains surrounding Lower Mainland, that is covered in and surrounded by Indigenous art, all designed by Musqueam artists. They have new uniforms and kits that you can put on your ultimate team. And there is also a Musqueam team that will be playable in one of the leagues as well. So there are 11 different Indigenous artists, Musqueam Indigenous artists from Vancouver, who were commissioned to create this artwork. It is authentic. It is unique. And I think that it is a beautiful thing that a big company based here in the Lower Mainland has done in an act of reconciliation and in an act of inclusivity. And I think that they deserve a big hats off for that. So my hat is off to EA Sports and FIFA 23. Larisse, who are you taking your hat off to this week?
I'm excited. I'm taking my hat off to there is an Aussie rules football player named Joel Selwood. And Joel is not just a Aussie rules football player. He is like a legend in Aussie rules football. He is a 3-time captain of the All-Australian team, 6-time All-Australian, quadruple premiership player for Aussie rules football in the Australian Football League. And his team, this is a fun name, the Geelong Cats,
Nice.
won the grand finale just yesterday, 2 days ago.
That is the greatest name for a championship in any sport.
The grand finale. And so the Geelong Cats were playing the Sydney Swans in the grand finale of the AFL. And Joel, who is this amazing player, was celebrating. The game ended, and he ran to the stands where he found their water boy, Sam Morefoot. And Sam is a gentleman with Down syndrome, and he has been their water boy of the Geelong Cats since 2015. And he went and they don't stay on the playing area. He was in the stands, and he went and immediately ran to pull him out of the stands with the help of his team to get him on to celebrate with the team. And it was just this beautiful moment that went viral. And I think we need to see more of that. So thank you, Joel, and way to go, Sam.
Elliott, take us home.
Yeah, Aussie rules football, great. One of the few benefits of working at a casino until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning was coming home and putting on TSN and seeing Aussie rules football on TV on some nights. So I do appreciate.
Did you ever get to watch a grand finale?
I don't know that I ever watched a grand finale. 4:30 in the morning. I'm not sure. I was really sure of what I was watching, but I enjoyed it. My hats goes off this week to Dolphins special team player Trent Sherfield, who, beyond just finishing the game, actually managed to stand up after taking a punt right off his ass in the middle of the game today. And I mean, like an NFL
point blank.
Point blank right off his ass. If you haven't seen this clip yet, find it. Trent Sherfield. It is hilarious, not just because of the comedy of the entire situation, but when you watch it in slow motion, you realize, like, after it hits, his entire leg just buckles under him.
It's gonna leave a bruise.
Oh, dude.
They cut to the ball. They cut to the ball going out of bounds. And he's just laying there.
You know what? It's awesome because Elliott, there is now going to we are like one clip away from actually being able to put together like a full NFL like highlight package of just arse related humor. We have the famous who's the Jets quarterback who literally ran up the ass of one of his line mates there face first, right? Mark Sanchez, right? Mark Sanchez running with the ball, and he runs face first into the rear end of one of his tight ends. And then today, I mean, you're right, Elliott. I will post it on our social media.
It is
there
funny.
is a still too of it where you can literally see the flesh of this man's buttocks being displaced by the ball, and it is a serious impact. I mean, he punted that ball straight up this guy's keister. It is so uncomfortable to watch, and it is absolutely hilarious. I 100% agree. That is one of the greatest hats off of all time.
So NFL, you're on notice one more time. We need one more arse related video highlight for the package.
Oh
wow.
It's so worth it. It was so funny.
All
I mean,
right.
it's funny now because they managed to win the game. If they'd lost by 2 points because of the ensuing safety, it maybe would have been less funny. But oh my goodness,
it's funny. It's very funny. Please go out and find it. I don't know what the nickname will be. It'll be like, I don't, there's a lot
we're
of
calling
bad.
it butt punt.
Butt punt. Butt punt. All right. Well, let's leave it on butt punt. That is fantastic. Thank you, Elliott. Thank you, Larisse. Thank you for having this conversation with us today. Listeners, thank you out there for your support, for your continued support. Again, if you haven't already, please subscribe, follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. That was Hat Trick. Hat Trick is a member of the Ordinary Podcasting Network. It's produced every week by Jordan Dowler Coltman and Braden Dowler Coltman. And follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thanks for listening.
The Ordinary Podcasting Network wishes to acknowledge that the lands on which our conversations take place include Treaty 6 territory, the traditional meeting ground and home for many Indigenous peoples, including the Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, and the Nakota Sioux peoples, as well as the unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations.
We acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for generations. And we extend our appreciation for the opportunity to live, create, and share stories on these territories.
The Ordinary Podcasting Network intends to engage in conversations and dialogue which acknowledge that reconciliation is not a destination, but a journey, and that we remain committed to practicing our craft in a decolonized space.